Hi there. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I want to share something a little different, a story that feels like it's straight out of one of those wild, imaginative claymation movies. You know the ones I mean. They are a little dark, a little quirky, but always full of so much heart. My life has felt a lot like that. It has been a journey through some pretty shadowy places. But it's also a story about finding the light switch in a really dark room. I invite you to pull up a chair and get cozy. We're going to talk about spirits, struggles, and the incredible strength we all have inside of us, waiting to shine. My story starts in a home that was filled with a lot of love, but also a lot of heavy feelings. It was like a constant storm cloud was hanging over our heads. There were family struggles that felt bigger than me, grown-up problems that a little kid could never understand. I often felt like I was living in the background of someone else's movie, just a small character trying not to get in the way. It was a shadowy existence where whispers in hallways and sad looks were the main script. I learned very early on to be quiet, to observe, and to feel everything around me very, very deeply. This feeling of being small and surrounded by big unseen forces wasn't just about family drama. There was something else in the air, something I couldn't quite name. It was a kind of energy, a presence that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The house would have strange cold spots, even on the warmest days. Doors would creak open on their own. It was a world where the supernatural felt just as real as the kitchen table. These little moments made me feel like I was living between two worlds, the one I could see and another one just beyond a thin veil that was watching me back. Because of all this, I became a very curious child. I was fascinated by the things that nobody wanted to talk about, the unexplained noises, the fleeting shadows in the corner of my eye. They weren't just scary to me, they were puzzles. I wanted to understand what was happening. I wanted to know why our home felt so heavy, so full of secrets. This curiosity became my little flashlight in the dark. It was the beginning of a long search, a quest to find answers that would take me down some very strange and sometimes terrifying paths. It was a journey I had to take to eventually find my way back to myself. As I got older, that childhood curiosity grew into a full-blown obsession. I felt like a detective, and the mystery was the spirit world. I started reading every book I could find about the occult, witchcraft, and all things paranormal. These subjects didn't feel evil to me back then. They felt powerful. They felt like a way to finally get some control over the invisible forces that had shaped my early life. I wanted to understand the rules of that other world. I thought if I could just learn its language, maybe I wouldn't feel so scared or powerless anymore. I was drawn to the idea of magic, of spells, and of communicating with what was beyond. My friends and I started our own little ghost hunting adventures. We would go to old cemeteries and abandoned buildings, armed with flashlights and tape recorders. It was thrilling. It was like we were the stars of our own spooky movie. We would ask questions into the darkness, and sometimes we would hear faint whispers back on the recordings. We would see orbs of light in our photos. Each little sign was proof that we weren't alone, that there was something more out there. It was exciting, and for a while it felt like a game, a way to connect with a world that was mysterious and alluring. But the game started to feel less like fun and more like something serious. My interest in witchcraft went deeper. I wasn't just reading books, I was trying things. I was casting circles, lighting candles, and calling out to whatever spirits might be listening. I was looking for guidance, for protection, for a sign that I was on the right path. I was so hungry for answers, so desperate to feel a connection to something bigger than myself. The energy I was inviting in felt ancient and strong. It was a dance with shadows, and I was so captivated by the music that I didn't notice how close to the edge I was getting. The line between curiosity and danger started to blur. The supernatural events became more intense and personal. It wasn't just about faint whispers anymore. I began having vivid night terrors, dreams so real I would wake up screaming, feeling a heavy pressure on my chest. I would see dark figures standing in my room, not just in the corner of my eye, but right there in front of me. Instead of feeling empowered, I started to feel watched. The very forces I had sought out for comfort and control were now making me feel like a prisoner in my own home and in my own mind. The experiences became more and more frightening. It was no longer a thrilling adventure. It was a constant state of fear. One night, I was lying in bed, and I felt a sudden, ice-cold chill sweep over me. It wasn't just a draft, it was a presence, heavy and angry. The air grew thick, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room and moved toward me. I was paralyzed, unable to scream or move. I could feel its anger and its sadness, and it was overwhelming. It felt like it wanted to swallow me whole, to drain every bit of happiness and hope I had left inside of me. This wasn't just happening at night. The haunting followed me everywhere. Objects in my room would move on their own. I'd leave a book on my desk and find it on the floor across the room. I would hear my name being whispered when I was completely alone. My emotions were a mess. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every little sound. My friends started to worry about me. They saw how tired and scared I looked all the time. The search for power had left me feeling weaker than ever. I had opened a door, and now I couldn't figure out how to close it. The darkness I had invited in was starting to take over. The most terrifying moment was when I felt like I wasn't in control of my own body. It was a feeling of being a passenger, not the driver. My thoughts felt like they weren't my own. Dark, negative ideas would flood my mind, things I would never normally think. It felt like a possession, a battle for my own soul. I was losing myself. The person who was curious and hopeful was being replaced by someone who was filled with fear and despair. I had wanted to understand the darkness, but now I was drowning in it. I was so lost and so scared. That was my breaking point. In a moment of pure desperation, huddled in my room as shadows danced on the walls, I realized what was happening. I had been playing with fire and I was getting seriously burned. The occult wasn't a source of power, it was a trap. It promised control but delivered chaos. It promised answers but gave only more fear. I knew with a certainty that shook me to my core that I had to get out. I had to fight for my life, for my spirit. I didn't want to be a character in a horror story anymore. I wanted to find the light again, no matter how hard the journey would be. The journey back to the light was the hardest thing I have ever done. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was a slow, painful climb out of a very deep pit. The first step was to get rid of everything that connected me to that dark world. I threw away the books, the candles, and any objects I had used in my rituals. It felt like a breakup, letting go of something that had defined me for so long. I had to cleanse my space, not just with sage, but with intention. I had to declare out loud that I was taking my life back. I told the darkness that it was no longer welcome here. It was my first real act of power. I started searching for a different kind of spiritual connection, one based on light, love, and healing. I began to explore meditation and mindfulness. Instead of looking for answers outside of myself, in old books or shadowy corners, I started to look inward. I learned to quiet my mind and listen to the small, gentle voice inside of me that had been drowned out by all the noise. This was my true guide. It was a voice of peace, of love, of hope. It was a slow process, and some days were harder than others. The fear would creep back in, but I learned to meet it with light. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. The night terrors faded. The heavy feeling in my home lifted. It was like the sun was finally breaking through the clouds after a very long storm. I started to feel like myself again, but a new version of myself. I was stronger. I was wiser. I had walked through the deepest darkness and found my way out. The experience didn't break me. It transformed me. I learned that true strength doesn't come from controlling outside forces. It comes from nurturing the incredible light that we all carry within our own hearts. Today, my life is so full of sunshine. I am no longer a ghost hunter. I am a hope seeker. My story is a reminder that even when we get lost in the shadows, it is never too late to find our way back. We all have an unbreakable spirit, a light that can never be truly put out. Sometimes, we just have to go on a wild journey to rediscover it. My claymation life isn't so dark anymore. It's vibrant and colorful, full of joy and peace. And my greatest hope is that by sharing my story, I can help someone else find their own light switch and turn it on.